Welcome back, everybody. All right, so hopefully you're on JSBid now, and what I've done here is I've closed off the CSS tab, and you can do that just by clicking it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about why CSS was invented and what we mainly use it for. On another note, usually I like to talk a little bit about my development faux pas and what I've noticed when I've been developing too, and sometimes I'll give a little bit of tidbit of information. So those tidbits of information are really important, and they're usually traps or mistakes that I've made that I don't want you to make. All right, so let's talk a little bit about HTML. So HTML, if you've taken the HTML course, you know that it stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which means that the HTML, what it does is it displays things on websites. So it puts in the text, the images, and it sets up some limited functionality like links and tables and lists, etc. So what it does is that at a very simple level, HTML displays everything. It sets up the framework. Now, in order to make it look better and to make it look more stylized, you need CSS. Now, in HTML, there are style tags, which I will talk a little bit about, and I'll show you a little bit about how they work. And what we do with these style points and properties is that in CSS, we take those style points and move it to a completely different file. So why would you move something from one file to another? And the reason is that even a few lines of code looks really complicated, and I'll show you this in just a second here. So a few lines of code look a little bit complicated, and when you take that code and move it to another file, it simplifies things down. A lot of beginner programmers, they end up putting things in one file, and all of a sudden you have like a 100-page code file, and it looks horrendous, right? And in fact, when I was making an Xbox game, and I did release an Xbox game a few years ago, before I released it, everything was in one file, and you know, I had to take it out, and it was actually hindering development. So I had this huge, I'd say probably about 100 pages actually of code, and what I did is I took everything out and I moved it to different files, and it looked way better, and it did speed up development, and I learned my lesson that time. So CSS, again, it takes all of the styling pressure away from the HTML document and puts it right in the CSS document. The same thing can be said with JavaScript. Now, JavaScript adds in functionality. So HTML displays it, CSS designs it, and JavaScript adds functionality. So if you want to add like computing power, like calculator or something like that, you need to use JavaScript. JavaScript is not to be confused with Java. Those are two different things. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these style points here. So there's going to be a couple things that we need to do. So we need to type in some HTML. So I'm going to type in a header 1, and I'm just going to call this header 1. Okay, simple enough. And remember, you always need to close off the tag here. And the last time I'll mention this, but if you haven't taken the HTML tutorial series, I highly recommend that you do it. All right, so the paragraph here, we can say, "This is awesome," maybe a few exclamation points, and of course we need to close that off. Okay, now you can stylize anything here, and the way we do that is we just type in style equals, okay, and 2 quotes, and you can say color orange, like that, semicolon, and you can go background color, and you need a dash there, and then you can say black, you know, and you can go font family, and you can say courier, okay, and you can see that instantly this is just 3 different properties here, and you can also do something like font size, and we'll make it 50 pixels, okay, and you can see it's a lot bigger now. Okay, so if we do the same thing with the paragraph tag, and we can go style again equals, and by the way, you should be typing this out while I do this. Programming is, if you want to get good at programming, you have to do it. It's not something you can just sit around and listen to and get better. It is you have to physically do it. It's like sports or music. Or art or something like that. Those are probably the closest things that I can imagine to. You can't become a championship weightlifter by cramming. You can't do it by thinking about weightlifting. You have to actually do it, right? Or if you want to become, you know, a good, you know, soccer or football player, depending on where you are in the world, you have to actually go and play. Well, with programming, you actually have to physically type in code. So I highly recommend just typing everything that I'm doing here. It gets you into practice, okay? So we can go ahead and put color, and then we can give this a cool color like, let's give it a blue color, semicolon. We can go background color, and you can put these into any order, by the way. Let's give it orange. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. We can go font family. We'll give it Arial. All right, something simple. All right, so let's make it impact, because I like impact. It's a good one. And then we can go font size, and we'll give it something like 30 pixels. Okay, there we go. So now you can see that now you can see that there's a lot of code in there. And for the most part, what we're going to do in the next tutorials, we're going to take all of these style points out, and we're going to put them in the CSS file here. Now, another thing that I need to talk about is the format of the video. You can see that the video here is fairly small, and you can actually see it. This works on all devices. I used to make videos that that would scroll around the screen, but I found out my user base does not like that, so this is the way I do videos. By the way, you're probably on a much bigger screen. You can definitely do that, okay? I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.